All right. Cheers,
All right.
baby.
Cheers.
Woohoo. We are back for, I guess, a first official episode. And we are really excited. This is Avatar Tea Time. I'm Jess. And this is my husband, Beaver. Say hello.
Hi. Woo-woo. Let's go.
Today we just decided that we wanted to kind of talk about episodes 1 and 2 from the first book, and kind of just talk about just our insights, our opinions, and maybe break it down a little bit into the characters, because that's pretty much the first 2 episodes is showcasing the characters, their backgrounds a little bit, and all of that.
Yeah, we get introduced to a lot of the characters, the main gang, and then the antagonist,
Zuko.
And his Uncle Iroh, and his crew. So
yeah, I guess first start out. It was actually really interesting watching these first 2 episodes for me personally. Just because we always, when we do just like have it on, the first 2 episodes usually isn't the one that we really gravitate towards.
I would say like the first
season entirely, maybe like the last few episodes of the first season.
Yeah, that is something that we pointed out right away too. Is like the opening scene. We're like, wow, the art is so different.
The art is so different.
Yeah, and I'm glad that they changed the art later.
Too.
And but it's just very, I don't know.
It's just simple.
It's simple, and then I think that we always forget that it's like a kid's show.
It
right?
is.
It's intended for kids, but I mean, I think that I had said this in like the kind of the intro, but like you just grow up with it, and then it means like so much more at different times in your life.
Yeah, I honestly forgot too how young they were when they first started out, because like from the first 2 like few episodes, because it's true, like we kind of grow up with the series as well, and so I definitely think like it brought me back to like the child Jess, I feel like, and like
for sure.
I don't know, just like watching the first 2 episodes kind of brought that back, because it's been a while.
Yeah. Do you feel like you kind of like have like the same emotions, or it's like deja vu when you're watching it?
A little bit of deja vu. It's almost where like, because I knew that we wanted to talk about it too, it was kind of like, I even mentioned this to you when we were watching. I was like, I wish I could go back to when I was young watching this again and just like know it, like I wrote in my journal or something. I wish I had that, you know, like where I just knew what my opinion was of the show. And because it is that like emotional deja vu, but like to have those insights would be so fun.
but at the same time though, like you're just watching it as
you're
a
just
kid.
watching it. You're just it's entertainment.
It's entertainment. And you would never think that. And if someone was like, you should write it in your journal about
I know about this show.
Like one day you're going to want that. You'd be like, what?
Yeah,
no, I just want to watch this cartoon on
like,
Saturday.
This is fun.
You know? But yeah, I mean, there's so many insights. I wanted to just kind of start off. Like we start off with, I mean, we had so many different insights. And it's just, I guess, life. Because as you get older, you just start to see like just things that happen. Like, we see Aang and Appa, and they're frozen in the thing, and then we get an introduction to Sokka and Katara and kind of their dynamic and everything. And there's a lot of insights that I had.
You start off with your insights, baby.
So like one of the first insights that I had is that you're introduced to them, and Katara, like just with her bending, like how Sokka is just like, what are you doing? You're like wasting your time like with this magic. It's just like this woo type stuff, and he's like fishing, and he's like, I'm doing something actually important,
and she's like over there
and that's just one of the like first insights that I have when when watching that episode.
Yeah. And to go along with that, I think that's exactly it. Yeah, like Sokka's over there fishing. He's like so serious about what he's doing and the task that he's working on or whatever. And exactly like what you said, Katara's over there kind of like experimenting, I guess, with this magic. You're kind of understanding that she really doesn't know too much about water bending, and then she starts to get emotional, and that's what was so interesting to me, is that it's we start to not only get this like sibling rivalry dynamic, not so much rivalry, but more of just like dynamic, like bickering and fighting, and Katara starts getting emotional, and that's when like that, because of her emotions and like not that kind of recklessness in her emotions, she doesn't know how to control her emotions, nor it illustrates that with her bending, and that's what ultimately, that's how they discover the boy in the iceberg.
Yeah, it's her emotions kind of not being able to control her bending. Yeah, that's cool.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, and then so like they free Aang. And then this is just something that I like realized, right? Being older, is that like immediately, I mean, I guess it's just hard when you're watching it when you already know how it all plays out, you know?
Right,
but like,
that's true.
You know, later, you know, that there's a war going on, and that like he starts to unfold his story and stuff, and so he ran away from home. He kind of like runs away from his Aang runs away from home and from his responsibilities as an avatar. Katara and Sokka don't know he's an avatar at this point. But then as soon as he's like unfrozen, he's like, "You want to go penguin sliding?"
I know.
And like me just being older, I'm just like, "What the heck, dude?" Like
you've
that's
been
like
in an iceberg. Do you realize that?
Yeah.
You ran away. Like, do you even remember?
And do you remember how do they tell him?
Well, because that's something I wrote down in the in regards to I think the second episode.
Oh, is it?
Sokka and Katara don't even know that he's the avatar. You know, all they know is that he is an airbender.
And they haven't seen airbenders in
in 100 years. Yeah, so they have no idea that he's the avatar. He hasn't mentioned or said anything. Yeah. It isn't until the second episode when Zuko.
It is interesting, though, I will say this, babe, is that, like, how he is purposely keeping that away from them. That
he is.
And not, like,
That's
in this,
true.
like, he's trying to, like, fool them, or it's just like he really just wants to be a kid and
he
play.
Does.
And if he tells them that they're the avatar, they might treat him different, or and he just doesn't want to. And so I have something to say about that, about the second episode.
Perfect.
But do you want to say anything about? I have another thing, but do you want to say anything about like the introduction to Zuko and Uncle Iroh?
Well, even before that, that's when we find out that before we get introduced to Zuko and Uncle Iroh, we find out that that Katara and Sokka, they are from this Northern Water Tribe village where it was just them. Essentially, like, Sokka's the only man. And that
do you
kind of
get an idea that like the Fire Nation has invaded them, and right?
Yeah, you kind of get some sort of idea like that because just from that even conversation with Aang, as well as with Sokka and Katara and the seriousness of Sokka, you kind of get the vibe that. Well, he also mentions that 2 years ago the dad went off to war. And so it goes into that seriousness, so you're
I guess. It does. And you're starting to pick up, like, during the first episode that there's something going on, that the men have to be off at war. And,
Sokka's this child.
That was one of the insights I have, too, is, like, how much responsibility, like, Sokka was put on. And I'm just, like, I told you this while we were watching it, but Sokka's, like, explaining how his dad and all the men have gone out to war. Sokka's, like, 14, 15.
Yeah, maybe 16.
When it's on him, so, like, 2 years ago when they went off to war. He's 12, 13 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And they're just like, yeah, we're all gonna go to war, and
it's only him.
Sokka, like, here you go, you gotta watch the whole tribe, you know.
And you're just like, what?
Yeah. And it sounds like he does say something about Aang. Sokka does. You can see that Sokka kind of doesn't trust, like, I wouldn't, you know, this kid that comes out of the ice, and yeah.
And he's just like playful. He just wants to, and the main reason Sokka's on edge is because he's like, okay, there's this supposed airbender that comes out of nowhere. Is he like an ally of the Fire Nation?
Yeah.
You know, is he coming to destroy his people?
And Sokka's just like a no nonsense type of person because he's been thrown into that role as like protector. But he, like, as you'll find out in the series, like, he is actually the like biggest nonsense type of person, you know. And that is also,
and he's just scared.
Yeah, that is also an interesting point, is that like he is naturally like this jokester type of person, but he was in this role, and you see how stubborn he is, and but I mean, when he's with his tribe is because he has to be. Yeah. And it's not working for him because he's trying to be this leader, which he's not yet, because he's not young, yet, and he doesn't know how to. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, sorry, baby.
No, you're good.
He just doesn't have that maturity yet to even understand that responsibility, I feel like. I mean, he goes into this like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go train these youngsters. You know, he's like, come on, crew, let's go help. You know,
it's funny because like with all the little kids, all his military like exercises, and even his watchtower, and it's just like things that a kid would make up if you put too much responsibility on. Correct. And it's like, you know, when you're older, you're just like, or if you even have like some like war experiences, like, dude, this is not gonna work. But he's doing the best that he knows how to. Right. With being so young, so.
Exactly. Yeah. It's almost sweet.
It is, yeah. I feel like this next time going around and just kind of talking about how we were wanting to talk about the Avatar, I have like a lot more respect for Sokka.
I know.
Because he's kind of like, as you'll find out in like later episodes, is that he's true. Like the comedic relief, but he shoulders like a ton.
He does. Yeah. There's relatability, I think, in all of the characters, and that's why again, why this show is timeless. It's timeless, and it is. Obviously, here we are, you know, later in our years, but as adults now, just like still obsessed with it, you know? Yeah. I think to go along with all of this too, I think let's continue talking about Katara and Sokka, and then we'll move on to Zuko and Iroh. Okay. But something else that I wanted to touch on in regards to bending in general is that Katara, she genuinely just wants to learn how to waterbend, and so that's why she feels this such gravitational pull to Aang. Is like, he's an airbender. I've never really experienced any other bending other than what I feel so strongly in my body, I assume, you know? And what we learned from her conversation with her grandmother in this episode is that waterbending is this like ancient art, and it's like part of their culture. Yeah. And just like, you know, knowing like culture, and to me is so strong, and knowing like who I am is so important. It gives you purpose. Yeah. And so I feel like that's envelops this again pull to Aang. I mean, as a little kid, we're like, oh, she has a crush on Aang, that's why. Right. But I think as an adult, it's a lot more serious, you know? Yeah, it's a lot deeper than it is. A lot deeper. That pull is just maybe feeling like understood for the first time ever, because that in her tribe, even though Gran, you know, even though Gran is an elder, she's a non-bender. She is a non-bender. And so she doesn't really know how to ever talk to Katara, or like to
relate with her with that, with something that's so crucial in like these benders' lives. And so even though, you know, Aang is a totally different bender, she's just like drawn to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting.
It is interesting. I like what you said about like just your culture and stuff. Like it's something, there's a lot of stuff about culture that's like it's not like bending elements, you know,
Right.
but it's hard to explain, and it's hard to explain to people certain aspects of your culture if like they're not part of your culture.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that.
And just explaining also in regards to culture, I'm Hawaiian. My husband Beaver here is Samoan. So culture is a huge part in every part of our life and our lifestyle, and just who we are.
Yeah, I mean themes will start to like be revealed as we go on, but like there's so much cultural stuff in this cartoon that relate to like the Polynesian culture.
Correct. Yeah.
Like honor, you know, like that's like I mean, jumping over to like Zuko. So Zuko is like the main antagonist who is searching for the Avatar, and he's trying to restore his honor. And you don't get a ton about him, but you just can tell he's like driven and angry, and he's like
needs to
He
prove himself.
needs to find the Avatar. Yeah, he needs to. And he's also, that is like, there's so many like parallels that we'll get into of like as far as like shame and
my gosh,
and like also just being forced to be a grown-up before it's time, you know, like it doesn't like, it starts to in the first season like kind of unravel his story slowly, Zuko, and like how hard he had it growing up, and that's why you can see like there's so much anger, and like he feels like there's no honor to like him right now, and he needs to get that back, and he needs these outside like you know forces, or just like
anything.
So,
so how Zuko gets introduced is that all of a sudden we see him on a ship, and he can see a light get triggered, right?
Yeah.
Is that the first scene when we see Zuko?
I think so. Like you can see him on the ship, and he's looking, and then
And so that's when we understand, and that's when we get introduced to firebenders. So at this point, we only know that, Aang's an airbender, Katara is a waterbender. We've heard that there are waterbenders in a separate area. And then we get introduced to firebenders. And we get introduced to firebenders with this like angsty teen again who needs to restore his honor, and he needs to find the Avatar.
Yeah, and he's like in this huge black menacing boat,
right?
And it's a war boat.
It is a war boat.
As soon as it goes to him and you're introduced to him, you can kind of feel like almost that same type of feeling like when you see Darth Vader. Like,
that's exactly what I thought too. That's exactly what I thought.
Yeah, so it gives like some insight into him, his character, and also just like who the Fire Nation is like they're this intimidating, like menacing force, you know.
A line that's so interesting, because we get introduced not only to Zuko but his uncle Iroh in that episode.
Yeah.
And something immediately that we understand exactly, that's our first scene. We see this warboat. We get this impression of Darth Vader, like this like dark sort of like antagonist, like the Fire Nation are evil, quote unquote. But then we get this line where it's like from Uncle Iroh, he's Zuko is firebending or being like training or something like that, and Iroh says that firebending comes from the breath. And we already are given these like little nuggets of wisdom from Uncle Iroh.
Yeah, he's like, it comes from the breath, not the muscle.
Not the muscle, no.
And you can kind of tell he's like a Mr. Miyagi type of character that's a teacher to him. And he has experience with like war and stuff. He's lighthearted.
Yes.
Yeah. And you kind of don't really know
any of their stories.
Yeah, their story. And so you just can see that he's helping Zuko. Yeah. And that's, Zuko kind of treats him pretty bad.
He does.
Yeah, he like is very short with him and ordering him like it's not his uncle, you know.
Right.
But, yeah, you can just tell that there's a lot of anxiety in Zuko, and he's just kind of, we've seen it so many times with a teenager that's young and he's just trying to find it, or they're trying to find their way, and they're making a ton of mistakes, and you're just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Looking
you're
at
like,
them.
okay.
Yeah, so he's looking for the Avatar. You don't know why yet. And that's kind of
first episode.
First episode, yeah.
Well, like our insights. A big insight also to go along. We kind of discussed it, but just how Aang is so playful. That was just like a huge insight in the first episode.
Yeah.
Is that Aang just wants to play. He's very curious about things. He doesn't take into account the severity of the Fire Nation quite yet. Doesn't understand the destruction they've given to so many lands and stuff, because then the first episode ends with them going into an old Fire Nation ship that has been abandoned. And they set off a booby trap. And so that's when we see that Zuko, he spots that there's an airbender. It must be the Avatar. And so that's what carries him to.
Well, does he realize it's an airbender, or does he just realize that it's a Fire Nation ship?
He sees that it's an airbender because the light shoots off and he goes.
Oh yeah, and then he looks.
Yes, and he's able to see that there's an airbender carrying Katara out of the ship. Yeah. And so,
should we mention too before we move on that it is like they do you do get in multiple different scenes where they're like, it's been 100 years since. So it's been a long time since anybody has seen the Avatar, and so both Sokka and Katara they're not suspecting him at all, because Zuko is not expecting Aang, this 12-year-old kid, because it's been 100 years. They everyone would assume that it would be this old person. Yeah. So, right. But he sees that, and so that's how it ends, is that they set off the booby trap, and then he is set course to, let's go over there.
Attack the village.
Yeah, attack the village. And then and then just opening into, are you ready to move to the second episode?
Yeah, I'm ready to move into
opening
the second episode.
To the second episode, you see that they're walking back, Katara and Aang. And you can see the whole village is out there, and they're kind of mad. And then that's when Sokka confronts Aang. Because Aang was just trying to have fun. Yeah. But he confronts Aang. And there's deep stuff to that too. He's the protector, Sokka is. So he's just like, what the heck? I still don't trust you. You did that to give away our position to the Fire Nation. Right. And all these feelings that he must be feeling. So
I thought it was really interesting. There's this even though Sokka is a child, he's 14, 15, I don't know, 16 by this point maybe. There's women and children. Yeah. The children are just like, Aang, hi, we're so excited to see you again. You're back. And all the women behind Sokka are angry, but they let Sokka. Yeah. Talk to Aang like that.
Kind of engage.
Engage with that instead of. It's just interesting. It's just interesting. They respect Sokka in that light. They must, Yeah.
Well, and it goes to show that he didn't just take this mantle upon himself to be the leader, protector.
Right. These women also pushed.
They put him there, and. That the dad put him there.
The dad did too.
And he says something interesting that I caught. He said, I promised, Dad, that I would keep you away from anything that might put you in danger. Right. Or something. He says so that. That's why he's on edge even more, Yeah,
he says that that to Katara. He doesn't want her to get in any danger.
And he's not only protecting his people, but his personal promise he made to his dad for his sister.
Yes. Yeah. Ooh, and that's huge.
Yeah. And then I had this point, so in that, then you just start hearing this rumbling, Sokka's getting ready for battle and stuff, but he has no idea what the
really
real
happening.
war is
Right.
about.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah.
That's something I thought of. So at this point, Aang leaves, right? And so then,
Does he? Oh yeah, he
Aang
leaves.
leaves with Appa, and then, so yeah, then Sokka starts getting ready for war.
Yeah.
And he immediately goes to getting the war paint on.
Everything you're supposed to do.
Everything that you're supposed to do, he gets all like dressed for war. What I imagine like how a child would picture
that has no real experience
getting ready for war.
Right. And he has not because he probably, you know, what you know of what's going on when you're a kid is a war is going on. But then, like, it starts to rumble, and then the Fire Nation literally brings their huge war boat, cracking the ice to come all the way to where they are. And you just see his face. Like, it's such a huge warship that he's just like, oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
But the cool thing, too, is that, like, you see Sokka, like, who he is in that moment, because even though this huge ship arrives, he's still trying to fight. And it's only him.
He's not giving up.
Yeah,
no.
It's all. They drop the gate. They drop the gate from the front of the ship, and then he comes out and he's just still trying to fight. And I did have a funny insight about how. Well, I guess it's not funny, but it just goes to show, like, so Zuko's mind has just been engulfed in finding the Avatar, knowing that the Avatar is supposed to be master of all four elements, and still searching and like going on this mission to capture the strongest being in the world, you know? Right. And so he's been training every single day. And so Sokka runs up and just without even trying at all, he just like kicks his stick out of his hand and then like kicks his face and sends him into the snow, you know? And so you get to see like, you get to see how advanced Zuko is compared to them.
In fighting and combat and just a lot of things in regards to that.
Yeah.
I know. I like that too, that insight. I also thought it was interesting that Zuko immediately comes in with just like power, like I am a firebender, and threatens that with the villagers.
Right.
And you know what, we get introduced. So that's our first introduction, or that's Sokka and Katara's first introduction to Zuko.
Yeah.
And then that's our first introduction to Boomerang.
Yeah. True. Yeah. Boomerang. The real MVP.
The real MVP. Because of course, when Sokka's down on the floor, he throws Boomerang, misses Zuko first, and then that's what comes back and hits Zuko.
Well, it's funny too because so he throws it, Zuko dodges the boomerang, and then he breaks his other stick that he got, his spear, and so he breaks it again, and then he's just like kicking his butt. But it's funny because it kind of shows too when the boomerang comes and like hits him. It's like you're a kid too. Yeah. You don't have a ton of war
he doesn't have
either.
a ton of
So
war experience.
I like that they do that. Yeah.
I do too. That's also the first thing that Aang says, you know?
Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
So Aang immediately after that comes sliding down on a penguin.
Yeah.
Because he can see from afar that after he ran away, or he kind of got kicked off from the village, kicked out of the village, Appa was too tired, so he took this penguin and slid down. And I thought that was so funny because it's like it develops his character perfectly. Like, he just slides down on this like penguin. He
to the Fire
gets
Nation.
to go to the Fire Nation and to help his friends. You know?
It shows that like he came back to help.
Shows that he came back to help and he cares.
Yeah, he cares about people. Yeah, and then that's the first thing that.
That's the first thing that he says.
Because Zuko's like, wait, because then he airbends.
You're an airbender.
And he's like, you're an airbender.
You're the Avatar.
Yeah. He's like, you're supposed to be
100 years old.
something years old, and you're just a kid. And then Aang's like, and you're just a teenager.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Because they're all just kids.
They're all just kids.
So
that's like
so
a
awesome.
good, it was a good realization too. Because that's why as a kid show, we related to that as a kid also, you know, because there are just a bunch of kids, and here, I mean, this is like an insight I was going to have towards it.
Yeah.
But it was like, they are just a bunch of kids, like Aang and his gang. So Aang, Sokka, and Katara eventually, they find hope, and they're just wanting to essentially kind of save the world, you know?
Yeah.
And Zuko's just a kid wanting to save the world in his mind, you know?
In his perspective.
And so, and that's, as a kid, like, that's what you want as a kid. You like, there's so much hope in your mind. There's so much hope of the world in your mind.
Right.
And you're going
to change the world.
You're going to change the world. You have this like desire to create change, to become, I don't know if all kids have that. I think it also depends on privilege and your upbringing, of course. But I think there's just lightness to being a child. There's innocence to being a child. And having that perspective. Yeah,
it's great being a child too, though, because I feel like then you grow up and then you try to come to this full circle moment to become like a child again.
True.
Yeah, because that's when you like love the hardest. That's when
that is true.
You look at the world and like we can change the world. We can do this. We can, like we can make a difference. And
it's hope.
It's hope. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have more hope when you're a child, and that could be like one of the biggest reasons too why I feel like our whole generation is drawn towards this. Is because it's kids who have hope that literally have to save the world that do. Oh, I don't want to give anything away.
That do save the world.
They don't.
Maybe they do.
I don't know. Yeah. Oh, I did have so Zuko starts firebending right at them, and Aang just realizes like how bad the situation can get, and so he stops fighting.
Yeah,
and he's like,
I like that.
He goes, if I go with you, like, will you leave these people alone? And so he sacrifices himself. And one thing that I thought is that, there's this like sigh of relief when Zuko is taking him up, and he's like, head towards the Fire Nation. I'm going home. And that's all he wanted.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I thought too. And I thought also it goes to show his experience with like, he's not truly evil. He's not like,
he just wants to go home.
He just wants to go
be accepted by his people.
Yeah, because if he really was like a Fire Nation general, you know, or like coming, he would have, like, because they were harboring the Avatar, they would have all been destroyed. Like, the village would have been destroyed.
Right.
But he was just like, okay. And I love that you put that, the sigh of relief. He just he's just take me home to the Fire Nation.
You can kind of hear it.
That's all he wants.
He's like, oh my gosh, I can finally rest.
Yeah.
Because it's probably been like the worst 2 years of his life.
Right.
Being banished. And
has it been, did it mention like 2 years?
I don't know.
He
says that he's been, so later on, we'll get into this, but when he's talking to the Avatar, he says that he has like been preparing to meet him for years.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's been years, at least. But so Aang goes with Zuko onto the warship, and they leave, and he doesn't seem to be very worried, like Aang.
Aang doesn't, yeah. He
doesn't. This plays into a cool other part where you get to see like just the dynamic between Zuko and Aang.
Yes.
Is Aang's just like, oh, I'll go with you. Like, okay. He's like, don't worry, watch out until I get back,
right.
And he's just like, whatever. And Zuko's so serious. But one thing that I wanted to mention is that he makes his escape. Like, he escapes really kind of easily.
Yeah.
On the boat. And
Punky.
Yeah. And Punky. And then so he he meets Zuko, and this is the first time that they fight each other.
Yes, that's something I wrote down too.
Okay.
Yeah.
You do you want to go with your point, or when they fight, or
let's continue on with this. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just thought it was interesting. So their styles are so different.
They are.
Like Aang is just like kind of having fun, like, oh my gosh, oh, I gotta move here, I gotta,
Right.
you know, and it's very like elusive, very free, and very playful.
Mm-hmm.
And Zuko's like bending as hard as he can within the boat,
Right.
and it's just violent, and it's very just like, yeah.
And does not care what he destroys.
He doesn't care what he destroys.
What's around him.
Yeah, and that's like one thing that I noticed a ton watching the second episode.
Yeah.
It's just the difference in styles. Yeah.
100%. And it's interesting too, like, because we know how much they've grown in their like bending, of course, throughout the book. So like it's interesting going back now and seeing even more so that difference, you know? It's a lot more simple, playful too, especially Aang. Like that's when we first see him like go into that airbending ball, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the first time, but it's one of the first times when he's like, you know, like he's like, that's when we see him like traveling around on his little ball.
Yeah.
But before they are, we see them battling on the ship. We see Sokka and Katara finding Appa.
Oh yeah.
And then deciding to go save Aang.
Yeah.
At first they're gonna go travel on the boat on this like little canoe that they have from their village, and then they decide to go on Appa. But I love the line that the Gran says to Sokka and Katara. Because that once they realize that the Avatar all in all just like brings hope. Yeah. And like here she is, she's elderly. I don't know how old she is, but she's lived her entire life without the Avatar, without this hope. It's been like the Fire Nation destroying her entire life, you know? And like now she has her granddaughter who is a bender and who feels this connection with this Avatar. And so now she says that that their destinies are all aligned. Yeah. And they both you see this like moment where Katara and Sokka look at each other and just like okay. Yeah. They don't really understand it, but you can tell like okay. But like as a viewer who has seen it, I'm just like yes. Their destinies are aligned. Yeah, seriously. And so it was just such a cool moment. And then it goes to Aang and Zuko on the ship. Aang and
they decide to go save him.
Save Aang.
And I'll mention it. I don't think I mentioned that. That's how they found out he was the Avatar, is by Zuko calling him out. It wasn't
the Avatar
that he like had told them. So all before this time, he had not told them. Yeah. And it came out through that fight. So so fast forward back to, so it goes to the ship. He makes his escape, and then Sokka and Katara show up with Appa and are able to save
Aang ultimately. Yeah. Except you want to know something? Yeah. So what I noticed is their battle, their fight in the ship, right? And Aang gets his staff. He finds his staff again. Uncle Iroh sleeping. Yeah.
Which I'm like, was he really sleeping?
Yeah, was he really?
Or was he just like wanting? You know, it's when you watch it back, you're just like, and knowing who Uncle Iroh is. Yes. But yeah, anyways, so good.
So he finds his staff. He jumps off like that top part. Yeah. And he thinks he's free, and then Zuko, you see him just and you see his face. You see Zuko's face, then an animated face, but like you see his face. He just is like. You can tell, like, he's like, no, like, this is my only chance, my only opportunity to return home. Right. So he does not care where he lands, what he does. He just jumps right after that.
He has one objective in his mind.
One objective. Yeah. And so I thought it was so interesting, you know, that, like, moment where he just, like, jumps after him with all
from the second deck.
From the second deck, doesn't care. And
yeah, I love that. It kind of goes, it shows like a couple of things too, that he's young.
Yes, he's young,
he's
fearless.
young, fearless.
With that,
and he's persistent.
Yes.
And you know what that reminds me of
Very
too?
Good.
Is that, so Uncle Iroh is his like fire bending teacher.
Right.
And he just has a lot of experience. But what that reminds me of, that just triggered when you said that, is in Batman Begins.
Wait.
Here's another. But tell me. It's Batman and he's fighting Bane. And Bane's like, you fight like you fight like a young man, holding nothing back. And then he's like, admirable but mistaken. Yeah, and so that's just who Zuko is, right now.
Right.
And he just has so much anger built up. And why, like, because I wrote like how persistent, that was one of the points that stood out to me, is even this is like also the first time that we get to see the Avatar state.
Right.
And something that I thought was interesting is that his firebending is good.
Right.
Zuko's firebending is good, and he's like advanced. And he actually hits Aang off, and he's like kind of knocked out in the water. And something that I thought was so interesting is that, you know what triggered the Avatar state?
Explain to me.
Is he heard Katara's voice calling him. And that just foreshadows a lot of things, you know what I mean? But like watching it, it's just very interesting. Like, and I mean, you get that thought that he kind of like loves her immediately when he wakes up, and she's the first one that he sees.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
interesting.
He could hear Katara's voice calling to him as he's like sinking in the water, and that's when magic.
And it's kind of like another, because last time he was triggered into the Avatar state though was in water.
Yeah.
Wow. So interesting.
Water. Yeah, so goes into the Avatar state, is able to kind of...
He's able to waterbend.
Yeah. He's able to immediately waterbend, and he doesn't know how to waterbend.
Right.
It's crazy. Yeah. I never made that connection before.
That's the first time we see him waterbending, essentially.
And so Katara's probably just like, what?
He's like, what? Did you see him waterbend?
Yeah.
And so then eventually they're able to escape. Katara, you can see that she tries to help escaping by doing some water bending, and she's not so good at it.
She's not so good at it, but
she's trying.
Yeah,
she does the job.
She got the job done, which has to feel good, you know.
Right.
It's her first like battle experience too.
Right. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I just read a point. Okay, so
go ahead.
When they're like going off, you know, they're about to go off, and they get stuck at the glacier because, of course, like Uncle Iroh's awake now and helping the fight, and they try to attack Appa and the gang with firebending. Yeah, when they're flying off, and then they get a snow piled onto the ship, and then they get stuck.
Yeah. And
what Uncle Iroh says as they're flying off is, who would have known, or something along those lines, that Fire Nation's greatest threat is just a little kid.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? And it's just like, that's another thought into this whole, like, it's just a little kid is greatest threat to Fire Nation. And he's just like, also, he says it like in a like, well, that's like good news sort of thing. Like, it's a good thing that, you know, he's just a little kid.
Yeah.
You know, that will cause threat. But Zuko over there is just like, he's like, it's just a little kid, and I couldn't like take him, but he's also a little kid.
So it's like another like shot at his ego.
It is a little bit shot of his ego. But also it's like, it's just like another whole thing to be like, oh, these are just all little kids out here trying to save the world.
Yeah. Right. And if you want like another like really deep thing, is that's like the future of any nation.
Right.
Like what can like take your nation this way or that way is the kids, you know, and like.
And that's what did.
And that's what does, yeah.
Or
like,
it does happen.
And that might happen.
That might happen.
Okay, and so I have one more point. So yeah, so he's disappointed. Their ship's stuck because Aang like airbent their fire to the side, hit the glacier, fell on their boat, so they're stuck. And then the end scene is them, and I think this is just such an awesome,
I agree. I think I know where
this
you're
is just
going.
like what I imagine. Like this is like where there's so much like nostalgia and just like joy that comes from watching this, because they're in the clouds, the sun's setting, it's beautiful, like the sky's pink, and like what I thought is that they're just talking, flying so high, and it has to just feel so cool.
Right.
You're a kid, you're free, you have a purpose now, like it's new, it's adventure, and I'm just like what are the conversations that they would have up there? You know what I mean?
Right.
On these long flights, just being kids, just loving life, you know. So yeah, and so they're talking, and then the one thing that I loved is that like Katara's like, why didn't you just tell us that you're the Avatar? And you see some of like the dilemma and the weight that Aang's holding is because he says, because I never wanted to be. Yeah. And it's just like a lot of responsibility, and you just already get this like kind of this inkling that like he just wants to be free. He does. But he has the biggest responsibility in the whole world. He has the biggest.
And you want to know something so interesting? Yeah. He's an airbender. Yeah. He wants to be free. And he's an air nomad. Yeah. Like that is like,
they don't even create nations.
No.
Or like,
they don't. They're nomads. They're nomads, yeah. You know? And so like I can totally see not only like him being a kid and wanting to be free and wanting to just be a kid, but also just like this innateness to who he is. He's an airbender. Right. You know? It's perfect. It's just perfect. Like,
and that comes up in so many cool and funny ways, because at the end of this episode, you know, they're like having this, I never wanted to be, it's kind of serious, and then he's like, okay, well, before we get you to the like water tribe, because that's where they're heading, right, is to get Katara a waterbending master and himself to teach him waterbending. He's like, we got to hit this place to have fun. And that's like the main thing that's on his mind.
Exactly. And you want to know something that I thought of though, and well, we talked about for a little bit over there. What? Is that it's not until he's really, okay, so he's like really sad. There's this big responsibility about being an avatar, and he just wants to be a kid. It's very overwhelming. You know, being the avatar must be very overwhelming. Right. And then it wasn't until he was just like, well, like in order to become the avatar, like she was just like, my grand would say that they were the master of all elements, and so let's go to the Northern Water Tribe, like that's our first step, and we'll just go to the Northern Water Tribe and we'll master waterbending together. And it wasn't until he was like, oh, we're gonna do it together, and then he understood, okay, that's my first step, master waterbending, and I'm gonna do it together with my friends. You know, it was so fun. And it was so fun. And then that's when he was just like, oh, and then we can go here and here and here and here, and that's when it was like, oh, this is fun, like we can have fun, you know. And so I felt like, honestly, I was like, thought about you a lot. Right. Because it's once, I mean, just humans in general. Like, when you're feeling so overwhelmed, you're feeling this great responsibility on your shoulders, and you're not wanting to necessarily have this responsibility, you're just wanting to have fun. Yeah. And, but when you have those like, oh, this is my first step I'm going to do. Oh, and I'm going to be doing it with somebody else. Yeah. Like, it's just like freeing, you know? It's back to like, oh, I know who I am now. I know what I'm supposed to be doing.
That I can do this.
I can do this.
Yeah. It's like when you feel like you're alone and the responsibility is just yours. And that theme shows up so many times where one of them thinks that they're alone, and then like, they're learning and growing that they don't have to be, if they like, rely on friends and the people that they love and stuff. And yeah, that, I mean, I relate to that a ton. You and I talk about like the balance of masculine and feminine, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, getting things done, but also just like, where am I headed? Is it headed towards like my purpose? You know,
Right.
and just like
It's overarching,
just the
like,
mind body
mm-hmm.
like connection, and
Yes.
that's what the avatar is. It's
That
this
is.
mind, spiritual body, you know, emotional connection, with all of it. And you know what else I thought about with
What?
your point is my coach Ryan.
Yes.
I talk about my coach and some of the insights that he gives me a lot, but he always like talks about this concept of that we're here having this like experience, and we like true like awareness is like realizing that we're all just walking each other home.
Interesting.
Yeah. And if you look at that, it's like, oh yeah, like we were meant to have like connection. We were meant to not feel alone. Like whatever your purpose is, whatever like you want to do, like you're not alone.
You're not.
And like everything is like going towards like wanting you to, I guess, like acquire that goal, or like, you know, like because it's just your dream, and like you'll have people that will
support you
because we're all in this world together, just doing our best and learning and
becoming our own avatars.
Oh my gosh, this is why this series, my gosh, this is why this series is so
don't cry, baby.
Good. It's so good because it's like, where else did you have like freaking insights like that with a kid's show, you know? Oh my gosh. But anyways,
that basically wraps up
episode
episode 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And goes to show how much we love it, and we can talk about it
absolutely
for hours and hours. But anyways, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.